Congratulations on getting y'all's first semester under your belt. That's a huge milestone, and the momentum is going to keep building. So very excited for all of y'all. To share a little bit about my journey. My name is Heather Gant Evans. I'm currently the Chief Information Security Officer at SailPoint, but it certainly didn't, my journey, I wouldn't have thought that I'd be here. I grew up in Greenville, Texas. So not far from Texas A&M University Commerce. Growing up, my mother was had addiction issues, and I became a teen mom at age 19. I really always knew I needed to go to college, but didn't have just a ton of like family that had been through college, and didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. But I did know that I wanted to do something that was going to give my daughter and I some independence. So first I had to be in a position where I could pay for school. And so I did it a couple of semesters leveraging Pell Grant, which was really helpful, and leaned heavily on Texas A&M University Commerce's Child Education Center to help like with childcare. So I'm still eternally grateful for the support that was provided to me by the university. But I also ended up joining the military to help further fund my education. And so I think about after finishing my first 2 years at Texas A&M University Commerce, which is mostly like basics, right? I didn't really have like a defined path for my major or what I wanted to do in my career. But I ended up going to the military and was away for 9 months, became trained all-source threat intelligence analyst, and was awarded a security clearance. And once again, that was a calculation to help with paying for things for school, but also because, the security clearance, comes with the ability to get a good paying job. So when I came back to Texas A&M University Commerce to finish out my degrees, I finished out an undergrad in sociology simply because I fell in love with the sociology course that I took as an elective. And obviously, I kind of decided at some point to go down a technology path, right? And that came with my master's program. So thanks to like the winter minis and summer courses and all of that, I was able to knock out the rest of my bachelor's and a master's in technology management at Texas A&M University Commerce relatively quickly. So I think probably in 3 years' time. And it got picked up by Booz Allen Hamilton, who does a lot of government contracting in late 2011 to be an IT business analyst supporting Air Force Real Property Agency. During that time, I was collecting a lot of requirements from different people in the IT organization to help them build out SharePoint sites to enhance collaboration across the organization, and also designed their IT governance. But it was at this point where a position came available in the Air Force Cyber Command to become a cyber threat intelligence analyst. And my bosses at Booz Allen saw that I had this master's in technology management and that I had been trained as an all-source threat intelligence analyst. And so they said, maybe you can marry the two and be a cyber threat intelligence analyst. And I interviewed with the government civilian manager, and he decided to take a chance on me, and that changed my life, right? Between being able to get the education that I needed at Texas A&M University Commerce, and being able to get some additional skills and qualifications in the military, and this one person taking a chance on me, it changed my career trajectory for my whole life. So I did 2 years of of cyber threat intelligence analyst at the Air Force Cyber Command, where it was a great opportunity and entry job in cybersecurity, because your job as an intel analyst is to read a bunch of reporting, right? So I was reading about how all these threat actors had used different tactics, techniques, and procedures to compromise different entities, whether it be a business or government organization or whatnot. And so I was able to just jot down terms that I didn't fully understand and make sure I spent some time Googling and researching them later And it gave me a vast exposure to all the different types of threat actors across the globe, the different types of approaches and tools and capabilities that they use and their motivations. And that kind of became my foundation for a cybersecurity career. But I really wanted to get a little bit more technical. And so I asked to be moved to one of Air Force Cyber Command's cyber protection teams. These were being newly stood up at the time, and they were teams that were responsible for doing offensive and defensive missions. And so what I mean by that is, like, they would defend the Air Force network by analyzing and trying to detect different intrusion attempts. And so I would help with some of that analysis. And then they would also try to do proactive threat hunting missions where they took things that they knew about how threat actors operated and looked for certain indicators of that technology tools may have missed, right? So did some threat hunting, did some malware analysis, looking at malware samples and dissecting it to see what the malware was attempting to do. So we could build out custom signatures to detect that malware in the future. And then I was also supporting offensive missions, which are, situations where, the US military, attempts to, compromise other targets, right? So leveraging our own cybersecurity techniques, tools, and procedures to do that. So it was a very wide exposure that I got to a variety of different operator roles. In 2014, I got picked up by E&Y, which is a Big Four consulting firm. Consulting was a great Kickstarter to my career after being in the military, because you end up supporting like multiple Fortune 100 companies on their cybersecurity transformation projects. And so my first project and the reason I got hired was to build out their cyber threat intelligence program, both for a customer, but also our own service at E&Y. So developing the market materials, identify what team staffing, what we needed, identify which services we needed to build to meet client needs. And so that was a fun, exciting time. But ultimately, I just kept expanding from there while I was with E&Y. There were so many opportunities to raise my hand and take on new projects that customers had requested E&Y do for them. And so I went from building out cyber threat intel programs to building out cyber exercise programs where we would try to test our ability to respond to a cyber incident by developing a scenario that we would use to then act out how we would respond to the scenario. And so sometimes you do those entirely paper-based. Sometimes you do them leveraging a red team where they're actually acting like the bad guy. And so that was a fun thing to build out. I then started building out entire security operations centers. So the threat detection and response teams, the cyber threat intelligence teams, the red teams, all working together to detect and respond to cyber threat activity. And then went on to start building out cyber resilience programs. And so that's the concept of connecting the incident response service within your business to enterprise resilience functions like crisis communications or business continuity or disaster recovery, to ensure that everybody is aligned on how they're going to coordinate and communicate if something like ransomware happened, right? So that was really insightful and gave me more of a business lens to the cybersecurity response component. While I was with E&Y, my last raise my hand moment was, I was like, hey, I want to get outside of security operations and start looking at the whole cybersecurity program, which includes things like governance, risk assessment, compliance, security architecture, identity and access management, all these other functions that I hadn't had as much of a chance to dig into. And so it just so happened that the new CISO at Home Depot had called EY to ask for a full cybersecurity program maturity assessment. And so I got stuck on that project and I was really excited. It turned into a 3-month-long interview, and I got offered the position to lead his security operations program. I did that for 2 years and ultimately ended up growing the team from 30 to 150 and was managing 150 security operators and engineers and probably about 60 different projects. It was a very intensive role. And at the 2-year mark, got reached out to by an executive recruiter for this opportunity at SailPoint. I was fortunate to have a good relationship with my boss, and he kind of held the hand of the hiring manager for my current role, and was a great champion for me during that career move. So here I am now today. I'm getting a lot of exposure to not just security operations and the governance and risk and compliance and security architecture components, but also product security, which is a really hot topic after a lot of you probably heard of what happened with SolarWinds about this time last year. SolarWinds was compromised by a nation state actor that did so in an attempt to gain access to SolarWinds customers, which included a large technology and government client base. And so product security is a big area of investment for many companies right now. And SailPoint is no exception to that. So I'm enjoying learning about that component now as well. So that's my long-winded version of my career story. Champions have been a huge part of it. My education and the support that I received at Texas A&M University has been a huge part of it. And the U.S. military, I'm very grateful for those opportunities.
Wow, thank you. That was great. You are certainly an amazing example for these ladies of what's possible, to take advantage of the resources that are out there, as well as make your own resources to do that. Anybody have questions to start off with right now?
Yes.
Okay, we have one. Jamie is going to ask you a question.
Okay, so I'm trying to think how to word this. You say you're in the military and you had a child at a young age. How did you deal with, just being in the military, I don't know what it's like, because I know you have to go off with having a kid, and also whenever you got up into higher levels of like in your career, were you ever judged, or, there's always like stigma with mothers and STEM careers. So like, did you face stigma for that?
Yeah, great question. So I did have support of my grandparents while I was going through school, so that helped. But then for about a year after school, I was a single mom, and it was a little tough. I was working the full-time job for Booz Allen, and had to make sure I dropped her off at school and went to work and picked her up after. Luckily, it was more of like a clock in, clock out job, because it was a security clearance job, and so you're not allowed to take your work home then, right? So I was fortunate in that there wasn't a lot of night and weekend work. But when I went to E&Y, I actually got married right before that, and had 2 more children during my 5-year tenure there. And I was traveling almost every week. So I kind of had pregnancies in the air. And I also had a shoulder surgery. And in total during that 5-year period, I was out like for almost a year of it between leaves, but I still promoted twice. And so I would honestly say that if you're facing any level of stigma for your like being a single mom, or having to deal with commitments with children or home, or aging family members, or anything like that, you're not at the right company. There's a great resignation going on, right? There's so many people are moving jobs, and people crave jobs that allow for work-life integration, right? That understand that there's fluidity between demands of home and demands of work. And a good company culture is going to reward you for your effort, even when you're dealing with those demands from home.
Great answer.
No,
Questions?
What was the most difficult thing about your college career, and how did you face that?
She wants to know, this is Nikki, and she would like to know the most difficult challenge you faced in your college career. And kind of like the question I was thinking, where did your motivation come from? Where did your incentive come from to keep moving forward?
Yeah, so my daughter like propelled me to want to be successful, because I was not in the best situation with like custody battles and stuff like that. And I wanted to just remove her from the situation. And I accomplished that goal. I now have full custody of my daughter, and have since she was 5, and my husband was able to adopt her. but it was like that wanting that independence for, and that security and that stability for my daughter is what really ignited me. I would say that the biggest challenge that might relate to a broader audience as opposed to those that were just single moms was kind of deciding what I wanted to do with my life, right? My major changed so many times, right? Ultimately, I decided I'm going to get an undergrad that I just feel passionate about, that I know I'm going to be excited about. And so that's how I landed on sociology. And then I went for I loved that they had this softer master's program that was still technology oriented, that I didn't have to have a computer science undergrad to go into the technology management program. So I was like, okay, I can do a year and a half of, a master's program that is a little bit more technical, which really scared me. Like I was not the girl I wasn't the one tearing apart computers and rebuilding them. Like I didn't know anything about computers. I wasn't necessarily excited about them, and I was really scared. But then I saw that there were like these faculty members of like women that were teaching it, and I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And, I worked through it because after kind of doing market research on like what was going to get me the best paying job to support my family, like technology definitely came out on top for me, right? Like I would love to be a sociology professor right now, right? Like I that would be awesome. But when doing calculations, I was like, okay, but technology looks like it offers me an immense amount of career stability, and a lot of financial stability as well. So it was really hard just making that decision, right? And I do think that there's a certain component that needs to be passion driven, but there's a certain component where you also need to be realistic about what your situation is and how much you want to be, how independent you want to be, and do some of that market research to decide like what's the best path for you, right? Are there a lot of job openings in this field? Am I going to be able to get a good paying job? Like all those type of things are good calculations to consider.
Other questions? Get one?
Yeah. Do you ever think you'll have a sociology related career, or do you think you're just going to stick with the type of work you're doing?
I think I do, really. Like when I think about it, working in technology, you really have to know your audience, right? Like, because you need to ensure that the end user is adopting that technology, right? And so sociology is all about understanding a population of people and like the hidden forces that drive them to act and think the way they do. And I also learned a lot about statistics and surveys, and those are important in any job that you do. And so I feel like I've leveraged that training, and it's served me well to like have that people oriented approach to technology. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not super passionate about technology. I'm passionate about the people that use it. And so approaching it from that perspective has made me a better leader and a better influencer, as opposed to some of those people that are so obsessed with technology, they forget about the people.
Yeah, and that's thank you, Jamie, because a couple of things you talked about, I reflected back on your sociology degree. Of course, I'm a social worker and I'm a social work professor, and providing this course that was kind of STEM related, but not the technology part. But so much of what's happening in technology and STEM is merging over into those human behavior type. We can't separate them anymore. We
Right.
really have to have those together. And so that really hit on some things we've discussed in here, in terms of how you can leverage both. And it's important to leverage both. And by more women coming into these fields, they're bringing that human perspective that has tended to be lost in those who just want to just sit in front of the screen and do the technology part. So I enjoyed hearing that you had the sociology background, and in some of the things you talked about, I could see how, even if you didn't recognize it, how you really were using that in what you do on a daily basis. Absolutely. Other questions? Oh, I had one and it just slipped my mind. Another thing that we've talked about in here, of course, still more women are infiltrating into the technology area, and of course, engineering and things, those are still lagging behind. But I think it's interesting that you talked about how you set your goal And part of that was on financial stability and what you could do to be independent and take care of yourself, take care of your daughter. We've talked about money in here, and that it's okay to say, I want to earn a lot of money and I need to earn a lot of money. But have you found, do you negotiate your salaries? Have you found that you've been offered less money maybe than a male counterpart has? How do you handle that part of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, just to back up a little, like it was very important to me to not ever need to be dependent on a man. I had, grown up in a small town. I went down the path everybody expected me to, and got engaged and had baby early. And it, when you're so young, like you grow different paths so quickly, or people change so quickly, like it was not a good experience. And I never wanted to be in a position where it was hard to get out again. And so I have found that earlier in my career, I didn't have the confidence, or I wasn't having the conversations with people in my network to understand what I should be making and then to advocate for it. I was fortunate that that same person that took a chance on me and let me take that first cyber threat intelligence role, after a year, he told me, he was like, hey, your counterpart just left and they've asked you to fill in for him. He's like, that was a more senior role and you need to ask for a raise. You're not getting paid enough, right? And I was like, oh, thanks. But having champions like that earlier in my career kind of helped build my confidence. And then I started realizing how important it was to have a group of women that are in the same career field at different levels, to talk to them about like their experiences, their salaries, their negotiating approaches. Because without that perspective, you really are kind of blind, right? Once you get into management, you're fortunate enough to have a broader understanding of what pay bands look like, right? But as an individual contributor earlier in your career, you don't have that level of visibility. So like leveraging your network is really important. And then the fun thing about being in technology is that there's a massive shortage, especially in cybersecurity and application development, of talent. And so because of that, you automatically feel in a better position to negotiate. On top of that, everybody's trying to increase the diversity numbers in these type of teams because of the fact that it's so hard to find diverse candidates. And so you're already such a valuable asset, not only because of the diversity of thought and approach that you're going to bring to the team, but the improvement in the company's metrics and the fact that it's hard to find anybody at all right now to fill these jobs. And so you absolutely can take a firm stance negotiating, but it just took me a while to figure that out.
All right. Other questions? I know y'all got burning questions. We're fortunate it's not an 8 o'clock class. I don't think they're all awake at 10 o'clock. So
I've not ever been a morning person, so I feel you ladies.
other questions?
So technology wasn't your initial passion, right? So going into technology, did you grow to like it, or how did your opinion change about technology being in it? How did you, do your job? Like what, did you develop a passion, or do you do it for your family, or just kind of like an aspect of,
Yeah, that's a good question. So my true passion is helping people. And so like, I think had I been in a position of luxury to like pursue anything, I probably would have been in some like very hippy dippy career, like a mindfulness instructor or something like that. But what I found is, one, I can do those things extracurricularly, right? There's certifications you can get. I enjoy meditating, like I enjoy talking to people about my own healing journey and like helping them. But as it pertains to my career, I used to get really demoralized because I thought to myself, I want to help people, and technology doesn't always feel like I'm helping somebody. Like, especially in cybersecurity, it can feel like you're just fighting bad guys all the time, and then you're kind of focused on the negative. But then I realized, like, wait a second, I'm surrounded by all these people that I work with, right? And I was like, I can help each and every one of them. I can help them have a happier work life, right? Especially once I started getting into leadership roles, I really sunk my teeth into the people management portion of leading, as opposed to just like I had absorbed a lot of the technical acumen and skill sets that I needed naturally through my career, but I found that like leaning on the people management portion of it is a much bigger portion of my job than it used to be when I was an individual contributor. And so I am very passionate about that. I'm very passionate about like taking an empathetic leadership approach, because when you think about leadership books, a lot of times they assume you're leading in a vacuum. They don't take into account that you might be leading somebody with bipolar, you might be leading somebody with PTSD, you might be leading somebody with dyslexia, right? You might be leading a single mom. There are so many different things that people struggle with that they bring to work every single day, and they don't always feel comfortable talking about their struggles. They don't always feel comfortable asking for accommodations, right? So I have a guy with dyslexia on my team. I don't ever ask him to be a scribe on a meeting. It makes him very uncomfortable. It's an easy accommodation that he was very nervous to ask for, right? Or, you know, I have somebody with like severe anxiety, and so I give him feedback in a different way than I give other people feedback, right? And so I've enjoyed those nuances of people leadership, and I am really passionate about it.
Perfect. You just made the social worker in the room happy. Yeah, because leadership is all about people. It's not, that's what it is 100%. It's about people and empowering people. So a couple of things that you said in your presentation, when you talked about you had a specific job and you were looking over reports and you would highlight things that you didn't really understand, and then you would go and you would look them up and you would learn about them. So my question is, how best do you develop the skills and abilities of learning how to learn? And what is the expectation, or what would you say an expectation is of somebody earning a degree? What can I expect my degree to provide for me? And what do I need to expect to continue to learn? And how do I develop those skills? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does make sense. And coming fresh out of like a bachelor's degree program and going into a technology or cybersecurity role, you're going to be entry level, right? And it's important for you, because you're going to have lots of opportunities available to you. It's important for you to ask, how are you going to support my success, right? Am I going to be assigned a mentor? What is the training budget for me, right? You need to make sure that they're prepared to invest in you, because like I said, there's so much demand. There's no reason to be at a company that has toxic culture or isn't investing in you, right? Or doesn't appreciate you, right? So making sure you're asking those questions up front is really important. And then as far as like learning how to learn, it's really important to be introspective there, right? Like, for example, some people are really good auditory learners, and they can just ask a question and somebody tell them an answer and they got it. I am not like that. I have to struggle to find the answer to myself for me to remember it. And so that's why jotting down terms like really helped me, because if I spend time trying to put the puzzle together with context clues and conversations and reports and then doing my own research, I'm not going to forget that journey I went on to learn that, right? I'm also a very good visual learner. So asking somebody to whiteboard out, like there's been times where I've entered an organization, I need to rapidly assess like the maturity of their network architecture. Hey, can you whiteboard it out for me? Like, what does it currently look like, right? Something that like that helps me to capture the information a lot easier. And so I think it's just being introspective and thinking through like, how do things really stick in your brain?
So no, okay, yeah, perfect. Knowing how you best learn, and then being able to leverage those things and not be afraid to ask for somebody to present it in a way that you can learn.
Exactly.
Other questions? None whatsoever.
Explained it all pretty well.
They said you explained everything so well. They don't know that they have.
I tried. Well, I do have a LinkedIn, and you're all are welcome to find me on LinkedIn. And if you have any follow-up questions, like, feel free to reach out. I hope that you all feel comfortable pursuing a career in technology, because the industry really needs more women. Everybody is an acknowledgement of that. And I think that there's a lot of return on investment there. So, however, if you decide on a different path, that's okay too. Just make sure you're doing that research and that you're, really putting in the effort to understand what your future is going to look like.
Right, great advice. One last question. Can you tell us what happened to Amazon's website yesterday?
Yeah, they had an outage, and it did impact a variety of different companies, including some security tooling companies that are responsible for, defending networks. So it's important to have that redundancy built in, so you're not leaning on just one AWS geographical location. But yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was. It kind of stops the whole world when something big like that happens. Definitely.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. One of the hospital systems I worked for years, Universal Health Systems, they had ransomware last year. It knocked them out for about 2 months. It was devastating. And I think they were able to do something without paying the ransom, or maybe they ended up paying it, but they tried for a couple months not to. But that stuff can really shut down a lot of areas, definitely. So
absolutely,
we appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for taking your time and sharing your journey. It is truly what's possible, ladies, truly what's possible with the work and putting in the investment in yourself. And we appreciate it very much.
Awesome. Good luck, ladies. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Heather.
Bye.